Okay, well, I'm Shanae,
And I'm Jenessa.
and we created Bloom, which is an Instagram platform which is used to empower women of all different intersectionalities. And I would like to start off by saying that we have completely different journeys, Jenessa and I. Meeting in a women in gender studies class, we really had nothing in common, but we found throughout having the conversation that we actually do.
We found common ground. Okay, so then I guess we will tell our stories. And first of all, I'm just going to say I've never done this before, and this is absolutely terrifying. But but of course, putting yourself out of your comfort zone is how you achieve your dreams. So here I am. So my story began when it was like my mom and I were by ourselves for the first about 5 years of my life. And in that time, we built a foundation that grew to be so strong and that continued to grow even after my stepdad came into my life. And that relationship that my mom and I had completely shaped me into the person that I am today and the person that I'm continuing to become. And in my family, it was very liberal and progressive. So with that, I was always taught to be open and accepting to all people, regardless of sexual orientation, religion, race, etc., etc. And it wasn't until going into the school system that I began to understand that just because this is the way my world works doesn't mean that this is the way the whole world as a whole operates. So it was the first day of grade 1, and the teacher had assigned spots. And the little girl in front of me, who just came from Jamaica, was supposed to sit next to a little boy. And because this little boy has never seen a black girl before, he began to cry. And my mom stepped in right away, being the person that she was, and said, no, that's okay, Jenessa can sit beside her. And now looking back on that experience with the mindset that I have now, I can understand how terrible that must have been for that little girl. Here she is coming to a new country, and all she wants to do is fit in and just to belong and have a place. And this little boy cries at her because of how she looks solely. And now, looking back on that, I can also understand that that was my real first experience with how someone can be treated so differently just by their skin color in total. So fast forward into the future and going into the university, and you can fill in the blanks on our Bloom page, as we talk about that a lot. It was like I was transported into a completely whole new world. The topics that we were openly discussing was something that I was told not to talk about when I was young, and these were topics such as racism, patriarchy, xenophobia, capitalism, etc., etc. And the fact that we live in Canada and there's a missing and murdered Indigenous women epidemic going on, and I didn't find out about this until I was 18. So looking on that, I feel like I can't help, but I'm missing this huge pivotal point in my life about all this information and all these conversations that I should have had. And then going home and talking to my friends and my family and my peers, I'm starting to understand that a lot of the opinions they're talking about are really ignorant. And I think because of this is a lack of education. So then that was the moment that I knew that I had to do something more and start these conversations. So I had a lot of ideas as to do something with my friends or with my mom, write a poem book, a storybook, something like that, but nothing really came to fruition. And it wasn't until meeting Shanae and getting to know her that she represented the hope that I had for the greater world. So, and that is how Bloom was created. It was one day we were talking about our goals and our aspirations in Campion College when we were supposed to be doing homework. But, of course, us girls, we chat all the time. And we said, you know what, Shanae? We have to do something. We cannot just choose to keep living behind this privilege that we have and just not letting this ignorance prevail in the world. And we need to do something and create a change. And that was how Bloom was created.
And so going off that, for me, Bloom was created out of solely the conversation. We were just talking, and that's how it started. So my journey is really different than Jenessa's. I grew up in a really small town, Moosomin, Saskatchewan. Not a lot of people, and everyone knows your business. If something goes on, everyone knows it. You walk down the street, everyone knows your name, which there's upsides and downsides. When I was in grade 6, I was diagnosed with a non-ossifying fibroma, which is a tumor in your, just a tumor, I guess. Mine was in my right tibia, and it eats your sponge bone, is pretty much what it is. I was in the 1 percentile of the tumor was eating my bone, So I went through two major surgeries, one for a biopsy and one to remove the tumor and to graft bone from my hip and put it into my leg. So with that, I mean, you're in grade 6, you're going through a lot of stuff, and I was bullied because of it, but I remember finally working up the courage to go back to school. And it was hard. Like, I was in bed for a long time. I was depressed. I didn't really want to see anyone. None of my friends came to visit me. But then I finally went back to school. And I was rolling in my wheelchair because I couldn't walk by this grade 8 room. And this one boy pops his head out of the door and says, "Look, there goes the handicap." And I was I was torn up about it. I remember going home and bawling to my mom. But then I thought, okay, I'm in a wheelchair for 2 weeks. What about the people that are in the wheelchair for the rest of their lives? How do they feel? What is going on? And I just thought, and it just made me so pissed off, because I was who is he to say that I'm a handicap for being in a wheelchair, for having a tumor? Because it was solely the fact that I had a tumor, that I was in a wheelchair. And so moving on from that was my first kind of moment that I was what the hell is wrong with this world? But moving on, I got into high school, and small town again, you have cliques, of course. And I was always known as the bigger girl, which I had nothing wrong with that. My mom always reminded me that I was beautiful and whatnot, but I was bullied a lot for it. So I was always called the fat girl and whatnot. And I remember my dance teacher was a main bully in that aspect of it. I did tap, jazz, hip hop, all that stuff. And we went to competitions and everything, but I was always in the back. And I remember always wondering why. I was always picked on by her. And I was a damn good tap dancer, but I was always in the back, so what the hell? But it was just because she just said, it's because you're bigger. You can't have a solo because you're bigger. So it was just those kind of bullying moments that I was what the hell? And so moving on into university, I started to realize all this stuff that happens to girls, and then it's not only me. Because really, I was in that mind frame that it was just me. This is just me. This is just happening to me. And in women and gender studies class, you get told about the sexism, the patriarchy, the misogyny. And I finally realized, I was shit, all that stuff has happened to me. And why, when I was 15, a 15-year-old girl, I was considered fat, and now that I'm 19, I'm curvy, it doesn't really make sense to me. It was the very sexist ideology. And so that just frustrated me right to the core. And I was what can I do? Why is this a thing? Why is my body always objectified just because I'm a woman, just because I have boobs? And I remember literally sitting there talking to Jenessa after we met in a women and gender studies class. And we were just talking. And it was we went to a bar one night. And of course, guys being touchy when they're drunk like to touch girls when they shouldn't. So that happened multiple times. So the topic of sexual assault and all that stuff came up. And I remember just talking to Jenessa and just being what the hell's wrong with this world? Why do guys think it's okay just to grab a girl? And yeah, so pretty much in Campion, when we were supposed to be doing homework, we were talking about closet ideas. And the closet idea actually worked. So yeah, that's kind of how Bloom came to be. And yeah.
And just again to say, Bloom is a social platform on Instagram currently to create an environment, a safe space to empower women and help each other grow. And right now it's just on an Instagram, and we do have a YouTube channel, and we share stories about personal struggles that people have sent in to us, or inspirational quotes, or just something, but the main goal is to get this conversation started. And from that, of course, we have our dreams in the future to make maybe workshops, or our long-term goal would be to have a camp for young girls. And so it's when they come into the world, they have this toolbox in the back of their pocket that they can put to use when they come across maybe something sexist or body image or just self-care in general.
And I would like to take this time to acknowledge that we are both white women, heterosexual women. So we do have white privilege holding us up a little bit. But in that token, we are not using Bloom by any means to speak for people. Because I believe that it's so important that everyone has their individual voice. And instead of standing up and speaking for people, Why don't you push them forward so they can speak for themselves? And that comes in with making a change. If we're ever to want to make a change in a community, in a school, in a setting with women, it's not standing there and saying, oh, we can do this for you. It's asking them what they need. What do you need from us to better your experience, to make sure that you can grow as a woman? Because that's what we're doing with Bloom. We want each other to grow. We want to bloom with each other, because it's not just one person. This isn't a one-person thing. This isn't just me and Jenessa. This is our followers, the people that support us, our parents. Yeah.
Exactly. And with that, we do acknowledge that we have to be authentic to who we are. We have to talk about those uncomfortable things, such as getting your period, or all of these things, or like feeling just depressed and down and just crappy about your body, but saying, hey, how can I use this instead to maybe help other women and young children, and not just that, but people of all intersectionalities. So the main goal is to start the conversation, and I think that's especially important now in this political landscape, because our future really is kind of unwavering sometimes. You know, if you look to America and all the things that are happening there, that scares the shit out of you sometimes. That like, oh my God, we have a president, and he's threatening nuclear war on Twitter. And that's the leader. You know what I mean? But, and aside from that, it's like, for Bloom, we don't want to define who we are, because when we do that, we put us in a box. And people have been put in a box for far too long. And this is what we're trying to do, is bloom from those boxes and break down those boundaries. Because when people are put into those, people are left out and excluded. And what we're trying to do with Bloom is to push us all forward, break down those boxes, and together, hopefully, we can create a change.
I think that the main thing that to take away from this, because this is our first time that we've really talked in front of people, which was really scary. But it's like your fear is your flame. Like set that flame to fire and be vulnerable. Allow yourself to feel. Because I think that that's one thing that we've lost over the years, is being vulnerable. Allow your emotions to shine. And that's what we're doing, being vulnerable, putting ourselves out there. And it's scary as hell, but we're trying to make a change. Okay, thank you so much.